What's up, everybody? This is Russ Dornish with CrossFire Faith in Gaming, and welcome to our very first ever Spoilercast. I'm joined by my co-host, the Reverend David Petty.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Yes, this is a spoiler cast, so if you have not played The Last of Us Part 2 and you don't want spoilers, turn off your radio right now.
Crossfire! Yo, get caught up in the crossfire! 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 You get caught up in it.
If you have not played The Last of Us and you like spoilers, or you don't care that we're going to spoil everything about the game, then keep listening. Or if you've played and you want to hear more commentary and awesomeness from us, that is what we're going to give you over the next 45 minutes to an hour. And yeah, so Russ, take us into it. Last of Us Part 2.
Well, so I'm excited. We already had a discussion briefly. We both said we love the game. You hadn't finished the game, so I just want to know, after finishing the game and hitting the ending, did you still love this game?
Yes. Well, I'm going to use a phrase. This is a phrase that I'm going to borrow from What's Good Games, which is that it was a game that I loved, that I hated, that I didn't like how it made me feel, but I loved that it made me feel. Yeah. Like going to a movie that you're like, oh my gosh, that movie made me cry my freaking eyes out, and I was super sad, and I hated it, but you also have to acknowledge what a good movie it was to make you cry that hard. That was this game.
I liken it to, I heard somebody tweet out when it first came out, was like, this is the Schindler's List of video games.
Oh,
And we can all say that Schindler's List is an amazing movie. But would I sit down on my Sunday afternoon just randomly and pop in Schindler's List to watch?
right.
No,
Yeah.
because of the feelings that it makes me feel.
Yeah.
It's
For me, it would be Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
oh yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, the Holocaust is very sad.
Well, that too.
That
The
was
other
probably
movie,
bad of me to make Holocaust.
the other movie I would say on a Christian wise would maybe The Passion of the Christ. Like, that's not a movie
Sure.
to pop in on a Friday.
Yeah,
night,
no, that's
but
you're not like, hey guys, what do you guys want to watch? This movie's about
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah.
No. Yeah, it was I mean, it was a game that made me feel all sorts of feelings about it and about other games. Having finished it, like it's hard to think about picking up another game without thinking the things that it made me think. Yeah, so I would say overall, this is a masterpiece of a game. I think it's ridiculous that anybody out there who played it said that they didn't like it, unless it's for some small reason like a button thing. But I respect your opinion, but I will disagree because I think it was a masterpiece. Hats off to Neil Druckmann and the team at Naughty Dog for giving us a masterpiece that I also want to say excellent job taking a risk. I think we're seeing far too many video games these days that take zero risk. And they say, okay, here's a military shooter where you have some loot and you shoot each other. Or here's another Assassin's Creed game. I love Assassin's Creed, but still. That's the same as everything else. You're going to go from place to place. You're going to learn a little bit about the region, and it's going to be the same. Naughty Dog said, no, we're going to take some really bold, really big risks, probably because of the success of Last of Us Part 1. I think it paid off for them. But hats off for taking risks, and I would love to see more game developers take more risks. Give us great art. Don't just give us a good piece of commerce.
Yeah, I mean, I think they took a huge risk, and I hate that, I hear all the time from gamers, it's like, games don't take a risk anymore. Why don't they take a risk? And here's a game that did, and it's gotten mixed results because of it. But I'd say the majority of people at this point, besides, the few people that are the loud minority, as they're called, because of, the homosexual agenda, the violence, whatever you want to say. I do believe that, like you said, it's a masterpiece. I feel like it's going to win Game of the Year. A lot of people I've seen have said, like, while other games are more fun and they're all this, it's like nothing comes to create this form of media and this art like this game does. And this kind of has to represent your Game of the Year.
You
Just
don't think
because of-
Animal Crossing is going to take Game of the Year?
It's fun. It's great. I've heard some people say Doom Eternal because again, that's just a
No.
mindless, dumb shooter, and I'm like, no. Ghost of Tsushima that just came out, it's getting great reviews and great praise from people, but I don't think it's deep enough, and it still has a lot of flaws. It has a lot of flaws,
Right.
and I will say that this game almost does not have any flaws from how perfect the game is. I didn't have any glitches or anything happen. The story is fantastic. The acting is fantastic. The gameplay well improved over the original Last of Us. And if you want to call that game of the year, then this has to jump up that much further because the gameplay got that much better.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do for the spoiler cast for everybody here, again, spoilers happening starting now. They're going to be happening. I'm going to go through the story kind of chapter by chapter. And if there's something that we want to talk about or discuss, then one of us will bring it up if we kind of remember the chapter and kind of go from the start to the end. So you guys kind of have an idea of what the game is like and our thoughts on the different pieces from the game. So this is a good companion if you are playing the game. But if you don't want to play the game and you like spoilers, which we know some people do, this will kind of give you an overview of the game as well. So the first overall chapter is Jackson. So that is chapter 1, and there's a bunch of sub chapters that make up each of these major chapters. But Jackson obviously starts out in the city of Jackson, Wyoming, which we kind of left off from Last of Us Part 1. You do get a little bit of a kind of Last of Us Part 1 summary, if I recall correctly at the beginning, which was kind of cool because they redid some of the scenes from Last of Us 1 in the new engine. And it looks great. So that was kind of cool. And then you kind of get, because you get to see Joel kind of explain what happened to his brother.
Right. Yeah, and I think for me the whole thing in Jackson, I would have loved to play more, quite frankly. Granted that's not the story that they were telling, but it was a fascinating area. It was a fascinating, it was beautifully set, and so it was almost like, give me like another couple hours to just hang out in Jackson and do fun stuff around here. But they pretty quickly whisk you away from that into Abby and into the rest of that story. But yeah, overall, I thought Jackson was beautiful. I love the way that they portrayed the kind of the relationship of, Ellie's grown now. She's kind of a teenager. There's kind of this strain between her and Joel, but you're not really sure why. Overall, I liked Jackson. It was fun to play through.
So yeah, I'm going to skip waking up because that's just kind of you waking up as Ellie, getting your gear, getting ready to go out on a patrol. It's kind of getting to know what Ellie's life is now like in Jackson. To kind of the shocking point, one of the shocking points, there are many, but the Overlook chapter, which is where you take control of Abby, a new character that we know nothing about. You're literally just thrown into this character, and you're getting very small bits and pieces as they go. Her and I should have wrote down some of the characters' names.
Owen.
Owen.
Yep.
So Abby and Owen are overlooking Jackson, and they are looking for somebody, but we don't know who or what or why. What were your thoughts on taking control of Abby? Did that surprise you?
Well, first off, before I answer that, did you immediately recognize Abby as the mystery girl from the trailers?
No, I didn't think about it for a second. And then later on, when you take control of her again, I'm like, wait a second. Because remember in the Overlook, she's wearing a jacket.
Right. Yeah, she's wearing a jacket. She's got a beanie. So it took me until I saw her in the tank top with the pony, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's this. Yep, I'm playing. Okay, there we go. Which I also realized, looking back on it, I didn't realize how big of a voice actor Laura Bailey was. So when they announced Laura Bailey as a mystery woman, and she talked about, trying to live up to, the performances of Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, I remember at that time seeing it and thinking like, well, this is not a minor character if she's talking about living up to those performances. So, is this Ellie's mom? Or there was a lot of question about that. But back to the Overlook. For me, it took me a while to even realize I was playing a different player. I was like, is she just got a different hairdo? She looks a little different, but like Ellie already looks different compared to the first game. The other thing that just really bugged me so many times in this game was just the common sense. I'm like, okay, seriously, you're in a post-apocalyptic world. There's zombies everywhere, and Owen's like, yeah, I'm gonna go back, and you're like, I'm gonna keep going on. That drove me nuts. But looking at it now, you realize that drive and that revenge and that desire to say, nothing will stop me, not even a question of not being able to survive, because I want revenge for what happened to my father. Which ultimately is the same thing that drives them both throughout the game. Is this person, this father figure that I loved, was murdered, and I'm gonna stop at nothing to enact revenge.
And we'll give, I want to give kudos to what Laura Bailey did with the character. And just so you know, she is a huge actress. The big thing is she's actually, so there's a group of voice actors that are all best friends, like best friends. It's Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, Laura Bailey, and then Laura Bailey's husband, who is another voice in this game. And he voices so many different characters in games all across. So it's kind of funny. Anytime you play a game, one of those people is probably in the game. And if one of them's in the game, probably all of them are in the game somewhere.
I looked up a list of Laura Bailey games, and it was like,
it's just like Troy Baker. It's Ashley Johnson, not as much, but she's in the nerd culture. She actually does a podcast group that plays D&D online with Laura Bailey, her husband, all those guys. So it's kind of a cool thing. But So
back to the Overlook. So the other thing that I want to say just about gameplay was, it kind of struck me, it caught me a little off guard how many infected you were fighting off with Abby, how quickly. It was like, I just started playing this game and you're throwing everybody at me. Like I must have died a dozen times. And I don't discredit that to my poor gamemanship. But it was hard, and it was like, even the time when I die that you're supposed to get caught, by one of them, I was like, I thought I was doing good. But that was a good, like, deep dive into the, throw you into the deep end of this world of infected. So anything else about the Overlook, or you want to jump ahead to
and then on
patrol?
On the gameplay aspect, yeah, it teaches you the new duck mechanic, dive out of the way. It does a good job of throwing you in, learning the new melee mechanics, which honestly, every Naughty Dog game I've ever played, every single one expands on the melee combat, all the way from Uncharted through The Last of Us. And I think they finally got it right. This one feels more organic. There's not like button presses that pop up or anything like that, which some of the other games have had. So I think they did a great job. So we move on. You're following Ellie and Dina. Dina's another new character who we find out Ellie likes, and Dina likes her, and so we don't know if they're officially girlfriend boyfriend. People are calling them that. Girlfriend. And so you kind of get to see their flirtatious adventure together, and it leads up to them kind of getting stranded, and kind of a big moment to just show where their relationship is, where they finally come together, and it's obvious that it's now an official relationship between them. So I think that was a good way to start that off. And it did make me start to feel for Dina pretty quickly. So what do you think about you? What was your thoughts on Dina and her introduction to the story?
Yeah, I thought, for one, I was really curious how people who may not have a lot of exposure to same-sex relationships, how that would have struck them. If it would have been kind of an instant frustration, or if it was a curiosity. For me personally, it was okay, these two people really like each other. There's love here. The other thing, which I love to point out in this kind of stuff, is even if you're not familiar with these kind of relationships, you're playing a game in a post-apocalyptic world with infected people and bloaters, and so learn something new about the world around you, and understand that even if you don't agree with it, relationships in a post-apocalyptic world are probably even more different than you might be familiar with in the current time. So, but I thought Dina as a character was great. I also thought, Shannon Woodward voicing her was phenomenal. And so I think that interplay, between Ashley Johnson and Shannon Woodward, it was a very believable relationship. And it had those kind of moments of tension. It wasn't overly caricaturized. It felt very real, very authentic, like any relationship, same sex or not. So I thought Dina's introduction was great.
Yeah, I think it was perfect. So now we're gonna move into. I'm gonna combine two chapters because they kind of go hand in
Okay.
hand. But the horde and the chalet, because the big moment happened.
Okay, hold on.
Um,
Before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about the patrol, the horde, and the chalet all at the same time, and
okay.
just say how blown away I was when I started exploring the world in the patrol with Ellie, walking around. Just the detail. I mean, I've found myself wanting to spend hours and hours in every single building that I stepped into. I wanted to read all the magazines. I wanted to look at what was on the wall. And so I just want to say hats off to Naughty Dog for the amount of detail that they put into this game. It was neat every time you stumbled upon one of those PlayStations and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a PlayStation over there. Which, did you know that you can't destroy the PlayStations?
I did notice that. I tried doing different things.
saw-
Well, same with the Vitas that are in the game.
Right.
There are multiple
Yeah,
Vitas.
I saw that somebody said that there's a contract that if you include a PlayStation in your game, it cannot be
Yeah.
destroyable. So, your reticle goes from red on everything else to when you go over the PlayStation, it becomes gray. You can't shoot at it.
It's a cool little nod. Naughty Dog does that in a lot of their games. I love when they do that. They do throwbacks to Uncharted. There are a couple of those in here. There's and I don't know. Have you really done any like
Hotline Miami?
collectibles deep dives?
No, I
in
haven't.
the
I
game?
haven't gone back. I mean, personally, so this is back to the whole thing about the ending and all that. It's been hard for me to even think about picking up the game again. It's like, okay, I got to the end of the story, and I don't know if I want to go back. Like I want to go back. I want to start over again and play the whole thing again. But I don't know if I just want to like jump in chapter at a time. It feels like I'm not honoring the story to do that. I don't know. It feels weird. It's just
it's
different
rough.
than any other game I've ever played.
But one of the collectibles, they always have like a strange artifact in their games, which usually ties to another game. And in this one, the strange artifact that you can get is Nathan Drake's ring from Uncharted. So
Right.
it's just kind of a fun, cute little
Yeah, I thought that
nod
was-
that they do.
I heard about that. That was neat.
So
Okay, so you want to talk about the horde and the chalet?
Yes. So Horde is the chapter we take on Abby, and she's going against thousands. It's the first time we've seen this in The Last of Us.
Yeah,
So
I was
a
like, is this
large-
Days Gone? Like, get me out
Yes,
of here.
I know. They took it straight from Days Gone. And so you end up, because at first I was like, am I supposed to start fighting these? And then I'm like, oh shoot, I can't fight all these.
No,
And
the
then
goal is to
I figured
run
out, oh, we run.
as fast
So-
as you can.
It's a great cool little mission to just kind of run. And then we get the shock of Abby is within an inch of her life. She's about to get eaten by infected. And who saves Abby? Joel.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's very interesting because Abby looks surprised. And you kind of think initially when you first play the game that it's because, oh, there's another human and they saved me. Like, what is this?
Well, but I mean,
So-
you probably also realize, like, so at this point, does she know what Joel looks like? Has she
No.
seen Joel? Yeah. So
No.
it's like another human, but she doesn't know who she's dealing with. She doesn't know who they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point in the game too, like I thought, oh, cool. This is why we've been playing as Abby, because now, they're going to go live in Jackson together and everybody's going to be happy. And I was wrong.
And I think too, going off of that, I think it's her seeing, people from Jackson and knowing her mission. It's like, oh, this could ruin my mission because they could go back and like tell them that I'm coming, or these weird people coming, or they wanted to do it very stealth like, because they realized that Jackson is a huge town with a lot of people and you
Right.
can't just go guns blazing. So they help each other out. It's Joel and Abby and Joel's brother, and they rescue Abby. And then they realize there's no way they can make it back to town. So Abby says, "We have a place. Come to our place." And so they make it to the place, and well, the first thing that happens is they introduce themselves like nice people, and
Right.
Joel's brother is like, "This is my brother, Joel." And to see all the characters in the room and their face when it happens, you're like, you know exactly what's about to happen.
Yeah, and I thought this was neat listening to the spoiler cast with Kind of Funny and Neil Druckmann and Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, just talking about that scene and trying to get the beats right and trying to get the facial expressions right, because there is so much that happens in that one like small 30-second, not even don't know, 7 seconds of time, from him saying, yeah, and this is my brother Joel, and they go Joel Miller, like, and everybody's face, it was perfect. It was very beautifully done. Yeah. So,
and then the moment, the shocking, like every gasp. I've watched so many YouTubers react to them playing this and doing it and just going, what? But Joel turns around, and that's when Abby says, or Joel says, "You look like you guys know who we are." And then it turns to Abby, who's holding a shotgun, and it says, "That's because we do." And then blam, blows pretty much Joel's leg clean off. It's still there, but it's not useful at all. What was your thoughts when that happened? Because it does go to black, so you don't know what happens after that.
Right.
You just, or no, it doesn't. It shows him pull him up against the glass.
Yeah,
and
then
hold him.
Yeah. I mean, I was shocked, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, and as soon as I saw the leg go off, I was like, Joel's gonna die. They're gonna kill him right here. I did love his line. Go ahead and say whatever speech you've had rehearsed, and let's get this over with. Which is kind of a testament, I think, to the idea that Joel has known that this is coming for a long time. There are consequences and repercussions to your actions, and so here it is. This is your judgment day, Joel. And yet, he's at peace with it. He's like, hey, I get it. I've done terrible things, and so let's go ahead and get this over with. And then she does, and then luckily I was thankful that they did not make you play through that, which Druckmann says in the interview was kind of funny, that the biggest thing is they want you to feel angry at Abby at this point. So, so the not making you play through it as Abby, was give you that perspective that you can feel that frustration and that anger and the sadness. And, so then that was that whole thing. It was also fascinating. I would just say, go listen to that Kind of Funny with Druckmann and Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, because I love their talk about Troy's thoughts filming that scene, and knowing what it would have been like for Ashley Johnson for her part of that scene. The screaming and don't kill him and all that kind of stuff. Because he remembers how hard it was to film the scene at the beginning of Last of Us Part 1 where Sarah dies, his daughter. And, even just talking about that in the thing, like Ashley Johnson was like tearing up and she's like, I can't even, so phenomenal acting.
Oh man. So I this is the one thing I got spoiled. Now here's my caveat to that though. Because what I got spoiled was I saw a picture of Joel on the ground, completely beaten.
Right.
And so I knew he died, but I was glad that I wasn't like somebody who was like, well, they killed Joel, I'm not playing this game. Because here I am thinking that was the ending, and it literally happens, an hour, 2 hours in the game. And so that was kind of the surprise for me. Still shocked. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And in that moment, I was like, I want to find every one of them and I want to kill them because, Joel is this beloved character. And I think that was the point. It was to make us absolutely hate these characters and have that feeling that Ellie did in that moment. And want to do that. Oh no worries. And do that. And then you get to play the story and you get to find out things are a little bit different than we thought, which I think is amazing. And I think that's the great part of storytelling. Also, in this very moment, the person that I hated the most may not have even been Abby. Honestly, I did curse at the screen when Manny kind of did his little thing with Joel and goes over the top of him and spits on his dead body and, says good riddance in Spanish technically and pretty much. So it made you feel angry that this happened. And I think this is what we were talking about with taking a risk.
Hold on.
So
can we pause for a second? We can edit this out.
Okay.
My green screen is.
Hey, what's going on? Why? It's also not green. It's gray.
Well, it's because it's not lit well. Hold on.
Uh, okay.
I brighten that up, and then
There you go.
I gotta do all the things to fix this stuff. Hold on. Let's
There
see.
you go.
It's better for the
Better.
well, but now my face.
Yeah,
is
we gotta,
like,
gotta. Yeah, I know. You're white, as white can be.
I am white as white can be. Do.
There you go.
There we go.
That looks good.
It's better. Let me see
Okay.
if I can dim, but keep the green.
Oh.
I gotta move this. Hold on. There we go. So, okay, we're good now.
So is there anything else that you want to say in regards to Joel's death and that scene and what happened?
No, I mean, I think it was just, on the one hand, I wondered, are we going to play as Joel at all? Like, did Troy Baker just have a tiny role in this game and now we're
Yeah.
that's it? The rest of the game is Ellie. But I also thought, I was like, okay, like that was bold, and I appreciated the boldness of that move, to take a beloved character and kill them off so early. And, and I will say, this is one of the things that, that was, famous in Game of Thrones, the idea that like, all right, well, sorry. What's his name? The Ned, Sean Bean. Is that right? I think it's Sean Bean.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. In the first chapter. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you get to end
Sorry.
that and you're like, oh, okay, well now, Ned Stark's dead. Cool. But it made it shocking. It made it memorable, and you were curious to see where they went with it after that. And so I've got to hand it to The Last of Us for doing a crazy, wild thing early on in the story, and giving us that. So let's go to packing
Now,
up.
well, packing up. So they decide they're going to go after them. They think it's this group this paramilitary group from Seattle because of some of the things that Ellie saw in like their bags and some of the things they
Right.
said. So they decide they're going to pack up, head out of town, and loving. Well, actually, no. They decide to head out of town, and they're going to sneak out. And what happens is Joel's brother instead leaves and tells his wife, Mary, I believe. I think it's Mary.
I think it's Mary.
Yeah. So tells Mary that leaves a note that he's leaving. So Mary comes and finds Ellie and says, I know you're leaving.
Right. And you think she's there to stop him.
Correct.
First.
And
Did a
then
really
she's
good
like,
job of that.
you need to go get my husband. You need to get Tommy back. And that's just the way that things need to be.
Right. Which I will say, so
that-
at this point, we're in Joel's house. And this is probably
Yes,
the
I
first
forgot
time I
about
cried
this.
in this game, because you go into Joel's house. And I mean, you as a player have played as Joel for most of the first game. And so there's this they did a beautiful job giving you the experience of mourning this person. You also get to go in and kind of see the parts of Joel you didn't know. The guitars that are in the house, the hobbies, and kind of going through his stuff and seeing some of the, what's the comic, the Starlight.
Yeah, the comic from the first one. I don't remember what she's called.
You froze, Russ.
Oh, you did too. Are we good? Am I
Nope,
back?
you're still frozen. You're still.
Okay. I don't know what's going on right now.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
Much better.
Yeah, I think it's cool how they show you get to learn more about Joel's life in that moment.
Right.
and
And
I
you
think
see,
that's
so what I was going to say, you see the comic that is, what Ellie loved, and you see, that he's reading up on like some things about space, and so you get this sense of like, oh, there's these parts of Joel that he was trying to get to connect with her more, by learning about the things that she likes, and how neat.
So one thing we forgot, in the patrol, when you're with Dina and Ellie, if you remember, they have a discussion about what they're going to do that night. And Ellie says, I'm having a movie night with Joel. And so you're like, okay, well, maybe their relationship isn't that bad, because it sounded
Right.
bad, in the morning at first. But then they're like, okay, they're going to have a movie night together. So they're obviously still have some kind of relationship.
Right. And at that point,
so
you
I
don't
think
know if they've been talking or not. You don't know anything about their, other than he comes in and teaches her that song, the Future Days by Pearl Jam. Yeah. So you have no idea. Did we already skip past the? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So they pack up.
they pack up. So we are now heading to Seattle. We don't get to see the full road to Seattle. So this isn't like the first one where you have, different stops. We go straight there. And we get to see beautiful Seattle in all of its glory in the middle of a post-apocalyptic world where nature has taken it back over. And um, we get introduced to some of the new gameplay elements as well. Things that I enjoyed. I like some of the new puzzle aspects because of the ability to jump. They added that into some of the puzzles there at the beginning of Seattle, with Dina and Ellie. And then I liked what they did with rope slash cords, in having to figure out how to throw rope and cords over different things to be able to climb and solve some puzzles. So that was kind of cool how they did the gameplay about that in the beginning. And then overall, just downtown Seattle is just an awesome area and stuff to explore.
Yeah, it
And
was
this is where you
neat
get your
to.
first open area.
Yeah, it was super neat to get to explore that whole area. I love what they did with the map and the Sharpie to say, it's we're going to give you a map, but it's not going to be your traditional like map in the corner. I liked some of the puzzles. I felt conflicted. On the one hand, I felt like they could have done more puzzles. On the other hand, I know they received a lot of flack for the pallets, which show up later in a funny little kind of head nod to the pallets. There's a point where she passes by a pallet and she goes, "Oh no, not these again," or something. I think it's in the museum. There's one outside in the water. So I wish there could have been a little bit more puzzles. Granted, this is not Uncharted. It's not primarily a puzzle game. But I would have loved to use the rope a little bit more. I also felt like they overdid some of the generators early on. It was like, oh, look, there's a gate. Well, there must be a generator. Let's go find this. But yeah, so yeah, Seattle overall was phenomenal. Also, what's her horse's name?
Shimmer.
Shimmer.
Is that right?
Rest
Shimmer?
in peace, Shimmer.
Or
Oh my
Shimmer?
gosh.
We aren't there.
We're not there yet. Okay, just kidding. Sorry.
No, because there's one more. There's one more
Unspoiler,
downtown
spoiler
moment we need
alert.
to talk about.
Shimmer's still alive.
We need to talk. We need to talk about the music store.
Oh my
which is our
gosh! Yes.
first, like the thing that this game
Cry number
does
2.
the thing the game does so well is it takes breaks, little small breaks in between what you're playing to give you kind of a reprieve, a deep breath, a kind of more drawn out story moment or something to kind of just pull you back away from the hard game that you're playing.
Right.
And the music store it's amazing to see them walk in and be like, oh man, like this is amazing. And there's a drum set and look at all these records and things like that. And then Ellie picks up the guitar and plays a rendition of Take On Me, which sitting there and you get to play it. Like the Naughty Dog ability to program a guitar and to have people play it is ridiculous. I don't know if you've seen all the videos of people videotaping themselves recording different songs on the guitar in the game.
It's a phenomenal. I thought they did a really good job saying, okay, the guitar is not just a story piece. The guitar is not just a set piece; it's a story piece. And so the guitar is a character, right? Like the guitar has its own story arc, and so the ability to then play it as a guitar and for them to take that and say, okay, well, how do you play a guitar? You strum it. And so can you strum the controller? You can also pick out on parts of the controller and you can go doom, 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 doom. And then to pick different keys and different chords and she's actually fingering the chords correctly, as I think we mentioned in the last podcast, at one point I was like, oh, well, I want to learn how to play that. And so I looked at how she's on the chord and I was like, okay, well, that's an F chord. And so it's a bar chord. And I learned how to play an F chord on guitar because Ellie taught me how to play it. So I thought that was beautiful. I think especially, it made me think about the value of music in a post-apocalyptic world where, we take for granted the ability to pull up iTunes, pull up Spotify, pull up Pandora, at a moment's notice and play a million songs. And, in a post-apocalyptic world, you don't have that. So the music can become even that much more beautiful to say, here's a piece of music. And so I think especially for her to play that, sit down and play the guitar, you have this instant like flashback of, in your own head, not in the game, of remembering Joel teaching her to play guitar and thinking, oh gosh, and now I'm remembering that Joel is gone. And so I'm sad, but I'm also glad that she's in this moment of sharing this intimate moment with Dina, where it's both a intimate moment with Dina, but it's also a moment of grief. And that comes through really well in the song. But then this was also the point, Russ, if you remember, I texted you and I said, okay, she just played this song. I'll be gone in a day or two. I was like, does she die too? Does she die? But, you actually only play a few days in Seattle. So in some ways, maybe that was a head nod to, I'll be gone. You're not going to play as me after a couple days.
I wonder too, kind of on a funnier subject with that, with Ellie and Dina being born in the apocalypse.
Right.
I wonder deep down if Dina had ever heard that song before. And I wonder if in her head she's like, dang, Ellie's really good at playing the guitar and making up these songs. This song's amazing. Just a kind of a funny nod of just like, the movies and things that we hear, because that Joel was the one that taught her that song.
Right.
Obviously. And so you just kind of wonder if that's kind of a funny little extra piece to it.
Well, and another head nod to Naughty Dog's music people and their researchers. At one point they were asking the question of like, hey, your song Future Days by Pearl Jam came out, let's see here. When did it come out? Anyway, in whatever year it came out, they were like, it came out technically after the infection day 0 happened, so that would have never been released. And Neil Druckmann said, actually, we did think about this. There was a version of it that came out on a YouTube video before it ever got released. And so the assumption is that Joel saw that video and learned the song before the album was ever released.
Pearl Jam head. Yeah.
And so it was like, oh man, like they actually thought all that through. So
hey, they were smart. They knew people would do that because that was
their musical research.
So we move on to Eastbrook Elementary, and this is where R.I.P. Shimmer, one of the first jump scares of the game, because you're riding along a Shimmer, and
and you've jumped over how many of these little like, oh, there's a short wall with razor wire, I'm going to jump over it. You've done it like 10 times. You think nothing of it, and all of a sudden, boom. And I had a moment of heart palpitation. Like, I was like, that is not okay. Like, holy cow. And this is one of those places where
it doesn't get
the What's Good Games podcast people were like, hey, this game needs some trigger warnings. So if you're listening to this, trigger warning, the entire game is a trigger for a million things. So make sure you're in a healthy place. Like, that moment I was like, if you had any sort of PTSD, granted, this game is probably not for you.
No.
Yeah, that period. But then especially, that was a hard moment. And then of course the freaking horse dies. But here's the sad thing. They spend 0 time mourning the horse. I'm like, this is your horse. Like,
doesn't even say
I wanted more. I wanted more horse mourning.
I'll tell you this, on a second playthrough, I still jumped at that moment because I forgot. So it still is like jumpy even, after you played. And after I did that, I finally told myself, okay, I was like, where is my jump scares? Oh yeah, I got to remember these so I don't scare myself again the second time through. So you get to go through, you're still working your way through Seattle. If I recall, not a lot of huge things happen besides just normal enemy encounters with the wolves, as they're called, the WLF, the Washington Liberation Front. And then they get shortened to wolves, and they're never called the Washington Liberation Front again. It's just the wolves.
I do want to say about this section though, I liked how they made this a wide world. And so it was literally like there's 15 things you can explore in Seattle. you choose. Choose your own adventure. You want to explore 1, you want to explore 15. What order do you want to explore them in? So I appreciated that kind of open world, mini world within this. And what a beautiful world it was.
I did forget one part of the open world Seattle, but them going to the synagogue, because
Oh yeah, so let's
that
talk
was
about
a
that.
huge moment in the game. Whew.
Yeah, and I thought
The
it
synagogue.
was. Go ahead. I'll shut up. You talk.
So Dina, no, you're good. You're good. Dina reveals that she's Jewish. And so she gives Ellie kind of a cool background on what the synagogue is and like about religion. And they have a nice little conversation about it where Dina's like, I'm not super religious, but I still pray. And I do it because of the way that it makes me feel. And I think this is a great representation of what a lot of people feel like with religion, and probably would feel like religion in an apocalyptic world of like, it's something you kind of fall back on because it makes you feel connected and feel better about it. I mean, what were your thoughts when you saw, the synagogue scene and how they discussed religion and all that in that scene?
Yeah, I thought it was a beautiful expression of religion. I also thought it was a much more authentic, much more realistic expression of religion. So often we see in games where it's like, oh, religion is there's a religious cult and now they've created a small society and they're murdering people. Or these religious people are trying to exorcise demons out of you. You always see the extremes, or you see a complete absence. Where people are like, oh, here's a moment where you would normally pray, but we're not going to say it. Or here's a moment where you might say God, but you're not going to say it. And so I thought it was neat for them to point that out. I also loved Dina's thought and sentiment of, to say, yeah, I'm Jewish and I pray, but I don't know what I feel about it. And it's comforting, and that's always been kind of my fallback to people is like, look, if you are struggling with your belief, if you're struggling with, why is God letting bad stuff happen? Prayer is still a beautiful and wonderful tool. Shout out to Mike McHarg, who is known as Science Mike on the Liturgist podcast. He has an entire book that talks about his struggle from conservative Christianity and his Southern Baptist fundamentalist upbringing to complete atheism to kind of more of a scientific based, I would say more open Christianity. But where in the middle of that, he's like, look, I'm an atheist, but there's still value in community, in church, in prayer. And he essentially lays out all of these arguments for church, even in the midst of disbelief, and then has a moment that causes him to believe. So I thought Dina's exploration of that and a neat little teaching moment to tell people like, hey, this is what a synagogue might look like. Here's what the Torah is. Here's what it means. Let's talk about rabbis. I thought was neat. And I almost wanted more, like I wanted, later on for them to find like a Catholic church and walk into the Catholic church and be like, oh yeah, I remember somebody talking to me about Catholicism. And like, oh, here's a mosque and we're going to talk about that. So I wanted more. But what the little amount that they did give me was beautifully done.
Yeah. So after that, and after we go through some of the chapters, the one chapter that I really liked, because it brings in a new gameplay element that I don't even know if you did or not. So I'm interested to see, but in the tunnels. So the tunnels is when you go underground in the subway system of Seattle, which there is one, by the way, because I saw a lot of people comment. They're like, wait a second, does Seattle have a subway? And they do.
So Seattle has an entire underground. Fun fact. Did you know this about Seattle? That Seattle is built on top of itself?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Seattle, and I wish they would have spent more time here. Cause I was like, I wonder if they're going to do this. Seattle actually had like I think it was a major fire. And then there was a major, like a landslide, and some of the city got buried. And so what they did was they just rebuilt Seattle on top of itself. And a lot of the first floors of old buildings just became the basements. And the second floors of the buildings became the ground level. So if you walk downtown in Seattle, there are places with like where the concrete of the sidewalk goes to glass. And it's because there's a tunnel underneath, and that's a light source for the tunnel underneath. You can take a whole tour of the tunnels in Seattle. Is your
Oh,
dog
wow.
getting there? Do we need to pause?
Yep. No. We're good. He wants attention. So,
Of course.
um,
Anyway, what were you going to say
yeah.
about the
So
tunnels?
in the tunnels, the scene where the red light is, the flares. So you run into Wolf underground, but then you also
Yes.
run into clickers.
I
And so
did.
something that
this.
I did, I threw a Molotov at the wolves and it lit one of them on fire, and she's screaming, and because she's screaming, like 10 clickers come running and they just fight each other, and I stayed hidden. And then when they were done fighting, I took off for my objective, and I just skipped all of that section.
Right.
So it was a cool thing. Did they do that in The Last of Us Part 1 where they mixed a scene with regular people and infected?
I don't remember having one, so I think this is a new gameplay thing for Last of Us Part 2. Somebody out there correct us if we're wrong. But I do think it was neat. I did the same thing. I was like, I'm going to conserve my ammo. And in some ways, I think it's also a nice commentary of saying, look, if there are people who are aggressive and people who want to kill other people and there's infected, let them fight it out. You just stay back and do nothing.
I'm just gonna...
Right? So this is like the moral of the game of like, it's best not to fight. Anyway. Yeah, I did that. It was fun. It was good to conserve ammo and just wait. So it was also very interesting.
Yeah,
This is a
it was
place with a
awesome.
lot of exposition where you read a lot of letters from wolves and get more understanding of like, their organization and how the things went. And yeah. So I like that.
Yeah, I will say that the collectibles from top to bottom paint
Mhm.
such an amazing picture of the world in a bunch of different ways. So
Right.
again, I know you're waiting to go back. I think you should eventually and really, do the collectible run and make sure you get all those because they do have a lot of exposition to what's going on in the world. So after we exit the tunnels, something happens at the end of the tunnels. So Dina collapses and is having a hard time and is exhausted. And so Ellie pretty much just picks her up and carries her, and they run and they look for shelter, and they find
Right.
an old
Well,
theater.
and this is also the
shelter.
place where Dina learns about Ellie's immunity. So you have this other little tiny revelation from
right.
Ellie, where she's like, Dina's trying to give her mask, which I'm also like, hold on, anyway. But the, yeah, so she's trying to give Ellie her mask, and Ellie's like, no, I don't need it.
Ellie's
like,
got crushed.
because, this chemical burn on my arm is actually not a chemical burn. Just kidding, I'm immune. So I thought that was beautifully done to just say this like tiny moment of, hey, you remember when I told you that I was immune and you thought it was a joke, and now this is a real. Because that happens in that scene where they go to the basement and they smoke weed, which a lot of people had problems. They're like, what? Oh my gosh, drugs. And I'm like, dude, it's the apocalypse. Like, anyway. So, but they have that moment. They have that intimate moment where, right. Plus people aren't, anyway, you could go on a whole tangent. We're not going to go there. Separate podcast.
On drugs.
Yeah. So,
about her immunity.
So she tells her she's immune. We find out that Dina's been sick, and it's because, surprise, Dina's pregnant. And then they go to the theater.
Yep. And yeah, well, because it's right in the theater when she reveals that, right in the lobby.
Right.
And Ellie does not take it very well. She's very angry. One, that she kept it from her, and two, that she is pregnant. And like, I'm assuming that she's partially mad that like Dina came with her knowing that she was pregnant, but I don't think she did. We never get clear. Like, if you read some of Ellie's journal, Dina does get sick a few times on the road, like in Idaho and Montana. She gets sick a few times, and Ellie just thinks she has a cold or a flu or some stomach bug. And then obviously we forgot that in Seattle there's a part where they come across a bunch of dead infected and Dina gets sick. So if you go back and look at that scene now, you're like, oh, she was pregnant. So
right.
Her smells are different. She's smelling the dead bodies. It sent her off. She threw up. all of that. So Ellie's not too happy. She kind of goes off on her own. You get another guitar scene here in the theater. If you pick up the guitar down in the theater, but a couple more puzzles and things like that. And then you fix the radio. Dina helps you. Well, you find out Dina ends up fixing it because she knows electrical parts, which is kind of cool.
Right. And she was talking about that she was
uh,
working with that guy for a while that helped her learn all those electrical things, which is neat.
Yep. And so from here, what happens is obviously Dina's not well. She can't go on. So Ellie's like, I'm going to go and try and find Tommy on our own. But we get a flashback. This is our first flashback of the game, and it is probably my favorite part of the whole game. It is the birthday gift. So we flash back to Ellie and Joel. We don't know how long after The Last of Us 1 or how long before this, but it is Ellie's birthday and Joel has a surprise for her. But the part that I like too about the beginning of this is Ellie and Joel are looking at, I think it's an animal or something, or he's trying to point something out, and he shoves her into the water, and that's when you get revealed that Ellie can swim now. And
Right.
I thought that was kind of a cute moment of Joel just finally like shoving her in, and them having some banter about it. And then Ellie gets some payback a few minutes later and gets to shove Joel in. But the best part about that is Joel's like, well, joke's on you. We are actually supposed to be swimming from this part on, so I'm not mad at all.
Yeah.
So seeing them, that relationship, it looks like the relationship is pretty good at this point. Like, it's better than what we thought it was with the way they were talking about it in Jackson at the beginning of the game. So you have to wonder, when is this and what causes Ellie and Joel to kind of not be buddy-buddy with each other. But that whole chapter, man, you're
talking about the birthday gift chapter?
Yep, the birthday gift. Ellie guessing what her birthday gift is, her surprise, and the first thing she says is it a dinosaur? And Joel's like, it's not a dinosaur, come on. And if you do some of the extra communication, she says like, is it my 6th grade teacher? Because I hated him. He was a dick. And she just goes through all these like different gifts and potential things, and it's kind of cool to see that back and forth. And then it's revealed it is a dinosaur. It's a giant dinosaur statue because they're going to the Wyoming Museum of Natural History.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on this kind of reprieve, flashback, getting to know? I mean, we get Joel back in the story, so
right. I thought it was great. It was a nice moment of recognizing, oh, we're gonna get some more Joel. It was a great way to tell the story, to talk about Ellie swimming. I also thought it was again, it's this kind of, Joel becoming more father figure like, hey, I did this fun thing for you. Look, I found this cool place for you. You like sciencey things. Here's some sciencey things. So I thought overall the museum was fantastic. Everything from the head nods to the giraffe, with the little hat you can flip on the top of the brontosaurus, or brachiosaurus. It was all phenomenal. Yeah.
What I love that this game. What's up?
Pause for 2 seconds.
Crossfire. Yo, get caught up in the crossfire.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We've got some more stuff to talk about here in a minute, but we're going to take a break. You can go ahead and grab a glass of water, grab something to eat, snack, something like that. And when we come back after the break, we are going to continue on with our discussion about The Last of Us Part II and our thoughts on it.
Okay, and we are back. We were going to pick off where we were last talking about, which we were at the end of Seattle Day 1. We had just discussed the birthday mission and the museum, which was an awesome and great little section, little callback, which I think the game does a great job of going back and kind of filling in some of the stories from the Last of Us to this game, and it really helps us figure out Joel and Ellie's relationship. So we are now on Seattle Day 2, and it starts in Hillcrest, which is this is probably one of my favorite parts of the whole game.
Oh man, this is my favorite part to not be my favorite part.
I know it's gameplay heavy, and it lets you kind of do anything. It's a huge area, and so the stealth and all the new gameplay features play an important role. You have a lot of dogs patrolling. You've got a lot of grass and buildings and different things. So yeah, and then we get the cool surprise at the end of Hillcrest once you get through there, which is a character grabs you and pulls you into a building to save you from being caught by some people. And honestly, this was actually a part that was played by a lot of demos. And the person that pulled you in was Joel.
Right.
So they did that to put it off the scent, but in the actual game, it ends up being Jesse, Dina, and Ellie's friend, who ends up being the baby father for baby daddy of Dina's baby. So, what was your thoughts on Hillcrest and all that?
So, I thought Hillcrest was a part I was looking forward to, especially as a part that was highlighted a lot in the previews early on. They talked about the dogs, about the fact that characters call out each other's names. They call out the dogs' names. At one point, I took down a character and the dog goes and sits and is sad next to the character. So then I'd feel really bad for taking out that particular enemy. Oh man, now I'm the jerk. But I thought it was a beautiful gameplay mechanic experience. I liked the fact that you could really go anywhere, you could do anything. It was kind of, again, that wide world without kind of the narrow path that it's pushing you down. And I thought the whole thing was phenomenal. I did think, though, just back to Jesse. So is it Hillcrest that Jesse dies?
No.
Yeah. So no, not
got
yet.
A little ways to go.
Okay.
End of day 3.
That's right. Okay. Well, we'll get to that later, but I thought it was neat to see Jesse there again, expecting Joel, but of course we know Joel's gone, but there was always this part in my head, like when I saw the first part of that shot, I was like, oh, wait a second, maybe Joel got out alive, which is clearly Joel didn't get out alive. What were your thoughts on that?
My thoughts, I thought it was Tommy. I thought it was Tommy grabbing us because we're looking for Tommy and we're chasing after him. So I'm like, oh, cool. So Tommy is here. And then when it was Jesse, I was like, oh, okay. Well, this is a cool little interesting. Okay, I'm kind of liking this because honestly, I like having the companions around during the game. I think it makes me feel a little less scared at times. And it's kind of cool to have those people to kind of help you in some of the situations that you're in. So you don't get completely insta-killed from clickers and stuff when you have a companion around because they come and help you. But yeah, it was pretty good. And then after Hillcrest, we jump to another flashback, which is finding strings. So that's the chapter with Ellie, Tommy, and Joel, and they're doing patrols. And there is obviously some tension between Ellie and Joel in this chapter. So what were your thoughts of this little flashback kind of expanding on? And I know that you had a comment regarding this mission.
This was definitely because this is the one where you go into the hotel, right?
Yep.
So so this one, there's obviously some tension, I think, story wise. My frustration with this, as with so many other things, granted, I've never lived in a post-apocalyptic world, anything closer than we're currently living in now. But the idea of we're going to go find some guitar strings at this music store over here. Let's go through this empty hotel. Oh, there's no way in. Why don't you go in by yourself? My thought was at that point, no, sorry, no guitar strings. We're just going to go back home. Because then you come across what, a shambler and a bloater or something. You come across a bloater, right?
That's a bloater. That's the first time we fight a bloater in this game.
And so I was like, seriously, I'm fighting a bloater so I can get some guitar strings. I know music's important here, but come on, we should have just turned back, gone home. Yeah, or find a way around. Again, there's the part of me that's can't you climb over that ditch? Anyway, but that was, I thought overall it was neat. It was neat to see the bloater again, to be oh yeah, that's right. We had bloaters back in the first game. It's really well done.
It's so it's a flashback. We're kind of getting a little more. There is some tension between Ellie and Joel. It's not specified why, but we're coming to kind of a point of why, and it kind of becomes bigger. So the next chapter is the Seraphites. We get to meet the new cult in the game, which is the scene that is your background right now. And oh, man, this scene got me. It is scary fighting the Colt as Ellie. They have the whistling communication, so rather than talk with each other, they just whistle. And it's freaky because you don't know what they're whistling about. Whether they're whistling
Right.
like, "Hey, I heard something," or "Hey, I'm gonna go check over here," or "I found somebody," which doesn't differentiate that much. And so you're just walking along thinking that you haven't been seen, and all of a sudden you get a bow right to the shoulder. So I think adding the Seraphites in was a great addition to the gameplay, and it adds that third kind of faction to the game that we have. What were your thoughts getting to fight them for the first time?
Yeah, so I think gameplay was really neat. Coming up both against that really heavy thing that whatever this guy is holding, like massive hammer, I guess,
Yes.
pickaxe. There's probably an official name for it, but that was neat. A neat mechanic to come up against, the pulling the arrow out of your shoulder. You played with me a couple times, and you're like, "Dave, you have an arrow, and you got to take the," and then I would die. But this was also one of the first times I think that you really come up against enough enemies that you have to use stealth.
Yeah.
Where so many other places in the game you're allowed to choose. Do you want to go stealth? Do you want to go Rambo? Do you want to just run through? And this one, I tried Rambo and I tried run through, and I was unsuccessful both times. So this was the first place that really made me use stealth. And yeah, the whistling was terrifying.
So after this quick chapter with the Seraphites, getting to know them, we get another flashback, which is the big one. So what I'm assuming happened is, again, Ellie is just getting upset with Joel. There's been something eating at her since the last game, which is she doesn't think Joel's telling the truth. So rather than just think that, she goes and seeks out the information. And this is a flashback to her actually traveling to Seattle and going to the hospital where everything happened and finding out that, in fact, Joel killed everybody there, and she was the chance at a cure. And not only did Joel kill everybody there, he killed the only doctor that could create a cure, which is just mind-blowing to see how the reaction is, and what it does to the relationship with Ellie, Joel saying, "Can you forgive me?" And Ellie pretty much saying no.
Right. And I thought
I'm
it
gonna
was
come back.
This was a neat place too, where you really get to, it unfolds a little bit more of the narrative from the first game, but it also helps you understand how imperfect Joel was, right? So, we already started in the first game. He's imperfect, and you're frustrated, and he's not really the villain, I wouldn't say, but he's, he's a frustrating. He's not the hero, but here you kind of get the sense of, oh well, maybe he might be the villain. If not in Ellie's story, at least in somebody else's story, he's the guy that took out the doctor that could have saved the world. So, you start to understand then a little bit more the motivations that Abby had, when killing Joel, to say, oh my gosh, this is intense.
Well, and that leads us into the next part coming up. But before we get there, so my big thing is, I don't think there's any good person in this world. I honestly think everybody's the villain. Everybody's a bad guy. That's how these people are surviving in the pandemic, in the post-apocalyptic world that's going on around them. And that's part of what we talked about with Joel dying, and how he was like, say your spiel and get on with it, because he has made so many enemies from doing terrible things, whether it's the Fireflies, whether it's something back in Boston, whether it's traveling across the US. It could have been somebody from what's his name? What was the cannibal's name again? David's crew. Like, there could have been so many different people that were hunting for Joel for revenge, that he didn't even realize who it was. He just says, say your spiel and kill me, because I know that's what you're here for, and I was waiting for someone to do that. So it's really interesting to just see that aspect, and to, again, now Ellie sees it through her eyes that, oh, Joel is not this great guy, this father figure that I thought he was. He's this selfish person that took away the one thing that was supposed to give me meaning. So we move on to Seattle Day 3. We are back with her on her way to the aquarium, trying to find Abby. And so you get the road to the aquarium, which is all of the, up and down in buildings and the water levels and all that.
Right.
So it's mostly, just, normal gameplay and fighting through with Jesse. However, after the road to the aquarium, Jesse, I believe. Oh yeah. So after the road to the aquarium, I believe they head back to. Actually, no. Sorry. After the Seraphites and all of that, they head back to the theater. We missed that part. And Jesse and gets to see Dina, and they know that she's sick, and they're like, "We need to go home because we can't keep doing this." But we need to get Tommy still, so let's go get Tommy. So Ellie says, I'm not after Abby anymore. I'm gonna go for Tommy. Let's go save him, and then we'll go home. It's fine. I promise. And then what ends up happening is Ellie's like, no, I want to go to the aquarium, even though they know where Tommy is and it's not the aquarium. And so Ellie and Jesse separate, and Ellie continues her vengeful tour to try and find Abby, which leads us to the actual aquarium. And in the aquarium, the first moment in the aquarium, which I'm like, this is terrible. It's the moment that you are forced to kill a dog, no matter what. It's a story beat, and it's a horrible story beat, as we find out later in the game, which is, again, I think great storytelling and way to make us feel something different, which we'll talk about at the very end about how this game made us feel, and all that. So that kind of ends that. She kills the dog. She goes in, she kills Mel and Owen. And Owen reveals, as after she has killed them in his dying last breaths, is that Mel is pregnant, which Ellie finds out and literally breaks down.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the moment that wrecked me a little bit. It was just this moment of, beyond just being a bad guy, right? You're like, beyond just saying, I'm killing all these people because I'm out for vengeance. Like, you just killed a pregnant woman. You are clearly not the good person in this game. Kind of like you were talking about, maybe there's no good person in this game. But that was a deep cut, I would say, to just, Well, so you come back as Ellie and it's like, okay, I don't feel good playing this game anymore. This is the first time I was like, can I put it down? Like, I need a break. But then you keep going.
It's
we have a lot to
interesting
get
for
through.
me. Well, yeah, it's interesting for me. Just real quick, it's I feel like because Mel tried to kill Ellie, I was like fine with it. I was kind of justifying it for myself, of like they didn't get a chance to talk, and Ellie was just asking him for information, and then they did that. But that's
which, once again,
morality.
back to the frustration part. Like, at that point, you got a gun pointed. Why not play the pregnant card? Why not say, like, don't kill me, I'm pregnant?
Which we see later on in the game in another moment. Right?
Anyway.
So Tommy and Jesse show up to save Ellie. They get her right after she kills. They're like, oh God. So they have to help Ellie go back to the theater. They're at the theater. Ellie's like has her moment with Dina, where they kind of have a quiet moment where Ellie's just like, oh my God, I can't believe what I've done. And, it's almost like Ellie, I think at that moment is like, I'm done with this. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I killed a pregnant lady. Maybe I shouldn't be so vengeful. And then what happens is Abby shows up at the theater, attacking Tommy. Jesse and Ellie break in on her attacking Tommy, and she instantly shoots and kills Jesse, which in that moment when it happened, I was like, oh my God, please don't be dead. And of course they pan down to his face and show that he has a bullet hole in his face. So there's no coming back from that.
He's gone.
And we get left with Abby pointing a gun at Ellie. And what does Ellie say? She says, I know why you killed Joel. I'm the cure. I'm the reason why Joel killed your father. Don't kill Tommy. Don't kill anybody else. You want me. And at that moment, it fades to black, and we pick up the story in the next chapter playing as Abby. Now, this is the
hold on, because I wanna get back to something.
Yes.
Which is, I love what Abby says there, and it comes back, I think, later. Where you're questioning, like, who's the good person here? Where Abby encounters her and says, we let you live, and you flippin' ruined it.
That's right.
And so there is this like moment of, hey, at least I showed you a shred of mercy.
And I just went for one person.
And now you're coming for revenge, which is granted, it's not like, okay, I killed your friend, but I didn't kill you. I'm the good guy. But at least there is this moment of I showed you mercy. I let you live. So that I think was a good transition for me into the next chapters to say, okay, let me question everything I think I know about who's the real villain in the story.
Yeah. So yeah, we move on to the next chapter, and it is you're playing as Abby. This is a moment that people were not happy with. They did not want to play as Joel's killer. They did not want to see that experience. And I think this is where Naughty Dog did such an amazing job of trying to flip the switch on you, more so than any game has ever done, because games are supposed to just be this straight shot, good guy, bad guy, I kill you, I'm the hero, I'm great. And now we're
Right.
playing technically the villain, and we find out through her story that maybe she's not so much of a villain as we thought. So we get to meet her father, and yeah, go ahead.
I did think it was a good thing for them to start with an earlier Abby, to go back far enough to say, let's rediscover, so many stories are about the loss of innocence, right? You go from even like Ellie's story, Ellie is this like kid who's immune, but then, she eventually kills somebody. And then, eventually she becomes this kind of almost monster in who she is. So it was nice to just rediscover that innocence and say, okay, well, here's Abby before she took a golf club to Joel's head. And, here's her a little bit younger and, less buff and less killing machine and more human. And also right around the age that you probably, maybe a little bit older than the first time you meet Ellie. So you have some of that kind of familiar thing. Mm-hmm. I also didn't realize at this point how long I was going to play Abby. I thought this was like a jump to a chapter of Abby and then we're going to go back. I was wrong.
No, half the game you play as Abby, and this is the half. So technically what we end up doing is we end up playing Seattle Day 1, 2, and 3 again, but from the Abby perspective, all the way up to that moment where she busts into the theater, which is excellent to be able to see. So you get to meet her father. You get to see kind of their talk. You get to see the moment that the father tells somebody that Ellie needs to die in order for us to get the cure. And you find out that Marlene from the Fireflies is like, no, there has to be another way, or it's not happening, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And
which even further makes Joel the bad guy, because you realize that Joel killed her.
Oh, yeah.
In pretty much in cold blood. When she was advocating for Ellie.
It's interesting.
But I will say that this is one of those places that I agree with. I think it was one of the people on the What's Good Games podcast was saying, at this point, like, just wake Ellie up. Like let's talk consent 101. Just wake her up and say, hey, are you okay with us killing you in order to find the cure?
Yeah.
You're good? Okay, great. End of story. But of course, that means you don't have the whole story. Also, I think you do run into the risk of, if you woke her up and she says no, what's the potential reality for not being able to find a vaccine because you couldn't do it? So I get why they wouldn't have woken her up and asked her. But you could have just said, like, so how do you feel? Oh, okay, you're against it. And then you kill her and you take the brain parts.
Well, yeah, that's definitely what happened.
But at least you give her the chance to say yes.
It's interesting because Abby and her dad have a moment after this, because Abby overhears the conversation, and Abby tells her dad, looks in the face, like, if you had to do that to me, I would tell you to kill me. And I have a little bit of a problem with that. I have a problem when people do that, when they take some huge decision and they say, if it was me, I would do this. And it's like, but it's not you. And so you're just saying it hypothetically. Right. I think if you're actually in that position, you might have a completely different response. Until you're in that position, you can't say whether you would do something or not. So in that moment, I wasn't on Abby's side. I was like, you don't understand what they've been through. You don't understand the relationship. So that's where I'm at with that. So let's move on.
I will say, though, I want to get back really quick, because the park is the part where you encounter the zebra, right?
Yes.
Which I will say, just beautiful job. Showing the compassion and the care, right? This is Abby is the kid of a doctor. So, you have this care for life. You also have this beautiful moment with this suffering animal where it's, and Owen is kind of like, come on guys, let's just go. Like, there's nothing we can do here. And isn't the zebra pregnant too, or something?
No, it had a baby.
It just had a baby. Right. Yep. Yeah.
So you get to see the mom and the zebra baby.
So once again, this this interplay of, you know, parenting and
Mhm.
but yeah, beautifully done with the zebra suffering. I felt really bad for the actual digital zebra, but
So yeah, we'll
so
move
then we
on
go to the
to
stadium.
yeah. So Seattle Day One, we'll kind of do an overview of this chapter because it's mostly the same thing. So you go on patrol to get to the central location on the front lines, and you start to learn about Abby and what she's done since then. You get a little backstory during this as well. The biggest thing you realize is she has dedicated her life to finding Joel and preparing herself to find Joel, because that's where you get the body type of her going from just a normal girl to now literally Arnold Schwarzenegger, female on steroids, who has been training for this moment, and has become a soldier. And in one of the flashbacks you get with her and Owen, Owen wants to kind of just end this. He's done. After the Fireflies, he's like, I can't do this anymore. Let's
Right.
just live our lives. Let's stop joining a cause. Let's just try and be ourselves. And Abby's like, no, I'm a soldier now. And it ruins her relationship with Owen, which obviously from previous things that you know, the relationship didn't work out and he moved on to Mel. But Abby loses that relationship because of her revenge and what she
Right.
wants.
And you see that play out from the stadium, you know, where they're clearly not together and there's a lot of tension, you know, into the aquarium where they have this, you know, little like moment together when finding the aquarium in that flashback. And then later in the winter visit, you know, it's again like, hey, we can just settle down here. We can have this nice life. And she's like, no, revenge is priority number one.
Yep.
And I want to back up on something you said. You know, I do think while on the one hand, you know, I've definitely said she is hulked out. You know, she is very buff. I will say though, it's been funny to watch the internet reaction to this,
Oh God.
because it's clear that we don't, we as the internet, we as people on the internet, don't know how to react to a strong, physically strong female in video games, right? You know, I think in video games we've conditioned ourselves to, you know, the idea that like your female protagonist is probably slender and probably curvy and
Yeah.
you know, and I love
Unrealistic.
that like Blizzard kind of challenged that in Overwatch, and they're like, hey, here's tall people and short people and fat people and skinny people and everybody in between. Here's strong people and weak people, and you know, and so, but I will say it was interesting watching the reactions of people saying, you know, like, oh my gosh, this is totally unrealistic that she's so buff, and people are like, have you ever been to a gym? Like, but it's
and
clear
that's-
that the gym is not just like a hobby. She goes to the gym to become a soldier, right?
And Naughty Dog does a good job because I've heard a lot of people be like, where'd you find a gym in the apocalypse? And literally Naughty Dog realizes that people are going to say that. And so
Right.
the first scene when you come out of your room in the stadium is a massive world-class, probably from the NFL football team in that stadium, gym that she
Yeah,
has.
and if you've
So-
ever toured an NFL football stadium, you see the gyms that are in there that people work out in, and it looks just like that. So
Yeah. So that's completely baseless. So people who say that are like, you know, they just made her buff to make her, you know, this cool character and blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, there was a reason. And that plays a huge part in the story. So after she heads to the middle, the central command, she finds out that Owen has gone AWOL and he may have killed somebody, one of their friends. And we now get to meet, of course, the leader of the Wolves, which is played by Jeffrey Wright from Westworld fame.
yeah, which I thought was neat. I wish they would have given him a bigger role. You know, I thought he was such an interesting character that I really wanted to get more from him, and especially as such a big actor.
Mhm.
You know, also kind of neat to have, you know, Shannon Woodward and Jeffrey Wright, both of Westworld fame, in this.
That's right. Yep.
You know, maybe Evan Rachel Wood will come back for The Last of Us Part 3. But yeah, so I think the other neat thing about this, throughout Seattle Day One, if we can just kind of jump through it, I think
Yep.
is, you know, it's the first time that you also realize that, you know, there's not just two sides. You know, it's not just like wolves versus the infected. You know, you realize that there's the Seraphites, and so it's kind of wolves and Seraphites and infected and Ellie and all the Jackson folks. And there's kind of, you know, there's all more sides to every story. You know, so that's neat to get all of those different things. But I'm wondering if we can jump ahead to Seattle Day 2.
Yeah,
And
that was the plan.
fast forward a little
so
here
G-
because I want to
Seattle
make sure we save enough time for our
the end
ending
discussion.
thoughts.
Yeah. So Seattle day 2, she gets to the aquarium. Well, she has to fight her way to the aquarium. On the way, though, she gets captured by the Seraphites, which leads us to that scene that we saw at the second ever reveal of the game, which is the hanging scene in the forest, in the raining forest, and we meet Lev and Yara, who are both
Hmm.
Seraphites on the run from Seraphites because Lev shaved her head, which is a big part of it and something that we find out a little bit later. So Lev and Yara help her, but they're also going to separate. Abby gets the aquarium, meets with Owen. Owen's a mess and saying, like, I can't go back. And he explains why he killed that person and was, self-defense. And then other than that, they have a relational scene that is quite graphic.
Yep.
And so that's just an FYI for people that there is that scene there with Owen and Abby. And then Abby has a nightmare about Lev and Yara and leaving them because they were kind of in a corner and easily could get killed. So she decides to go save them. So your next part of your mission is to go save those two. And you are able to help and escort them back, where Mel shows up at the aquarium. She's already there when you get back, luckily. And so she looks over and helps Yara, who had her arm bashed with a hammer. So literally they have to amputate it, and it ends with them having to go to the hospital, which there is a scene in the hospital. So Lev and Abby have to head out for the hospital, which is the final part of this playthrough of Abby. And so hospital basement. I want to know your thoughts on the boss fight in the hospital basement when you do get there. Because
Which chapter was that?
the hospital basement, it should be Ground Zero.
Okay.
Seattle
Yeah.
Day 2, Ground Zero.
Yeah. So a lot of things here. Oh gosh, so many things. Before we get there, I want to talk about how beautiful I thought it was that up until this point you have these snippets of Abby's fear of heights.
Yep.
And I thought it was beautiful because in a couple of ways, it humanizes Abby even more, right? This person who is extremely strong, who's spent her whole life dedicated, this second part of her life here, dedicated to becoming buff, to becoming a soldier, to killing Ellie, or killing Joel. And yet she has this fear of heights. And so what better way to put her directly in confrontation with her fear of heights than with the Descent chapter, where they have to go into the sky bridges that all of the Seraphites have, which is where you find out that the sky bridges are just cranes, and she's got to walk over the top of cranes. And oh my gosh, what a great way to make you as the player really feel that fear that she has. But I also want to talk a little bit about something with the, when you're playing as Lev and you come to understand Lev's backstory, and this was talked about in some of the other podcasts. The fact that you hear the Seraphites, I think it's in Return to the Coast, you hear some of the Seraphites call Lev by Lev's former name. So this is a process called dead naming, which is, if you look up some articles on Last of Us Part 2 and dead naming, it's when a trans person has transitioned and they now have a different name. And so they call out Lev's dead name, Lev's old name, from back when Lev was identified as female. And so this was, I think, a kind of problematic thing. I would just encourage people to look up on it. It's something that I actually, I knew was probably a problem, but never really thought about what that would mean to a trans person to encounter that. And I think it was neat to see it done in the way that it was done, see the commentary on it, and also then the call to say, let's try to just be careful when telling stories that include trans characters to tell better stories than just stories of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like Neil Druckmann's commentary on that. So I'd encourage people to check that out, learn up on what it is, how that can affect people. But then we get to the Ground Zero, the monster in the basement, which was reminded me of the end monster thing that you become in the end of Inside, which is kind of fun. But
and I told you it reminds me. They kind of went Resident Evil, which Resident Evil has always been known for these over the top, like, mutated zombie bosses that look just like that, which is kind of cool that they went in that direction and did something different like that than just the normal enemies that we fight.
And this was a part that you watched me play, and it probably took me like 25 tries to get through this boss fight. Probably because I'm an inept gamer, but also because it was just hard. But I thought it was cool. It was really neat to encounter that, and kind of a fun little boss fight. But once again, it's like you get to those parts and it's like, okay, we could either go back the way we came, or we could turn on all of these generators and open this door. It sounds like a terrible idea, but
yeah,
that's where you come.
And then we get to Seattle Day 3, which they get back to the aquarium. They amputate Yara's arm, and Lev is obsessed with trying to find his mother. But Yara is trying to remind him that his mother is so deep in this cult that she, along with the Seraphites, want Lev dead for what he did and for shaving his head and for wanting to be a man. And she says, you can't go back. She will kill you. You don't understand like I do. Like, you can't change mother. She's not our mother anymore. And so Lev decides to take a boat and just head out to the Seraphite Island. You also find out that the wolves are planning a siege on the Seraphite Island at the same time. So all of this terrible things, and Abby is like, let's go save Lev, Yara, and myself. And so that's what happens is they leave the aquarium and they head there. It's a kind of a cool mission. I definitely like the island area.
Probably one of my favorite parts of the game. I think, as a story arc for Abby, it's one of the first places that you see, kind of a completely selfless compassion from her to say, okay, I know the revenge and all that, but I'm caring for these two people. They're almost like younger siblings to her. And so this is the second or third time now that she goes completely out of her way to do things specifically just to help them, putting herself in harm's way. So it's neat to get the backstory on the Seraphites, to encounter the island. I also think once we get to the siege, the way that they did the siege and the fire, and it was hauntingly beautiful. So this was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole game, was playing through the island and getting through it and getting out of it. And but then I want to know what you thought of the boss fight on the pier when you fight the guy with the
pickaxe. Are you talking about that at the end of the island?
The guy with the pickaxe.
It's cool to be able to do that in the
fire,
rain.
And you're like, how is this guy not dead yet?
It's fun to do those melee fights that Naughty Dog does in a lot of their games. There's always some kind of huge brute that you kind of boss fight at some point. So it was very similar to that. So I had a lot of fun with that. The biggest thing, though, I wanted to say about the island level before we move on is Abby has her biggest line in the whole game during this section. And it is when the wolves attack them and Yara dies, and Lev looks at Abby and he's like, but they killed her. Like they killed her. Like, your people killed Yara. And that's when Abby says, you're my people now. Like, not them, you're my people now, which was so huge because that's Abby starting to break down that wall of revenge now and saying, like, I'm done with this. This is getting old, fighting people and fighting other things and seeking out this violence. Like, I am done with this. This isn't what I originally set out to do. And enough's enough. You're my people. We're going to figure out things together, which was, I think, where Abby really turned into the character where we're like, oh, Abby is actually the character that we want. And so we get to see that. So after all that, they head to the theater because they get back to the aquarium and they find everybody dead, and Abby's pissed off, and they're able to figure out that they're at the theater. And that's when we catch up to the story, and we have probably one of the weirdest boss fights / most thought-provoking boss fights ever in the theater, because as Abby, you fight Ellie.
Which I thought was great because, you would think that the first time that you encounter these two characters that you would probably fight as Ellie against Abby. But now you come here and you've got to fight, almost like fighting against yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Not that you're playing as Ellie, but you probably, maybe at this point have more care for Ellie surviving than for Abby surviving, if not equal care for the two of them surviving. So I thought it was beautiful to pit you against yourself, or pit you as Abby against Ellie. And I thought it was also a neat scene, kind of going around the props and the backstage of the theater and the downstairs and all of that. And then knowing Abby's skills against Ellie's skills and having to match those things. So I thought it was well done. It was beautifully executed.
It's one of the first times in games I've actually not want to beat a boss.
Yes.
I was very hesitant as I was doing it. And at the very end, you are just beating Ellie to a pulp. And Dina comes to try and save the day. And Dina, I can't remember, she gets gunshot or bow. She gets hit with something. And then at the last second, Ellie says she's pregnant while she's like through blood on her face. And that's when Abby has the same moment that Ellie does, where it's like, this isn't worth it.
I think Abby has to ask herself, I came after the monster that Joel was, and now I'm coming after you, Ellie, for killing my friends and the monster that you are. And she has to ask herself, am I as bad as you are? And I totally agree with you. This was one of those places. It was like, is there an option to not fight? Like, can I just say no and go the other way? Can I not hit square? So it was, I thought that was great. And this was a place where I also felt like, okay, like this is going to be the boss fight. And then this is going to be the end of the game.
Yep.
And then you go to the farm and you have that whole farm scene, and maybe that's the end of the game.
Wonderfully done. Ellie gets the life that she wanted.
Right. I think just if we're going to jump ahead into the farm real quick, I think it was really neat for me to see Naughty Dog put a normalcy on this relationship and this family unit, and to say, look, like this is post-apocalyptic, but like, look, they're on a farm, they're raising animals, they got a kid, they're like doing dishes and having kind of like little fights and dancing. Life is pretty good, until you go to herd the sheep in.
Yeah.
Which is, I thought, another beautiful commentary. You herd the sheep in, and then you have this kind of flashback PTSD moment. Again, as I said earlier, trigger warnings. Like if you suffer from PTSD, this is probably not a wonderful experience for you, reliving these things as Ellie. And but I thought for those of us that do not suffer from PTSD, what a great way to give us some compassion.
Yeah.
To say, oh, now I understand, because I lived through watching Joel die, and imagine if I was in a dark barn and had that kind of just invasive thought and sudden clutching of fear. So I thought it was excellent that they included that, to say, Ellie's gotten through this, she's living this perfect life, but it's not perfect. She's still haunted by these memories, by the past, by the potential for revenge. So you get through all that, and then we get Tommy.
Well, so jumping back real quick, it kind of ties into this. So Abby decides to break the chain of violence. That's the problem in this world, is this person kills this person, then this person seeks revenge and kills that person, then this person has somebody that comes and kills them, and it's going back and forth, and Abby's finally like, you know what? I'm realizing that this isn't going to end. Somebody's going to come after me if I kill these people. I'm done. This is stupid. I'm out of here. Ellie's still obviously feeling that, and the PTSD is just hurting her. We find out that Tommy's alive. Like, Tommy gets shot during the confrontation, and you think he might be dead, but no, he's just kind of crippled now. And his relationship is ending, and he comes all the way out to the farm to ask Ellie to come with him to seek revenge on Abby. And, of course, Dina's not happy with that, because she's like, this is enough. Knock it off.
I was not happy with that.
Oh, no, I hated Tommy in this moment. Hated him.
Yeah, I was like, Tommy, just give up. Like, you are a shell of a man. Just give it up. Go live in Jackson,
No, and he plays the card on Ellie where he says, like, I don't have the capability to kill Abby, and you promised me that you would go and kill Abby. So, like, you're breaking a promise. Thanks a lot, jerk, and then leaves. Which, again, it eats at Ellie. And so she decides to leave Dina and the baby. And Dina says, if you go, that's it. We're done. It's not happening. You're not going to come back to us. And Ellie still decides to go all the way to California to try and hunt down Abby, which we meet up with now. You get to be Abby and Lev, who are on the hunt for the remaining fireflies in California. Right. And
which I thought was such a – go ahead.
Oh, no. But they find a link to them, and they're all excited because they're going to reconnect with the fireflies. So what were your thoughts about them, that being their mission of finding the fireflies?
Well, two things. I think number one, I thought it was just neat to play in Santa Barbara. You get a whole different landscape, the California coastline, very different vehicles, very different homes, very different, remnants of life in the past. You get palm trees, which is kind of cool. So I thought that was really neat. I also found a lot of kind of hope and excitement and optimism. When you get to that part and you hear the radio and it's like, oh my gosh, there's fireflies out on Catalina Island. So there was a lot of excitement and hope there, which is, again, on the roller coaster, just as soon as you get all this excitement and hope, it just gets completely taken away from you by these rattlesnakes who come and kidnap you.
The new faction, the Rattlers from California.
Sorry, Rattlers, yeah.
Seem like they might be the absolute worst of the worst because they are literally working in human trafficking and have slaves and all this thing. So they capture Abby, and this is soon after Abby and them get to California, so the timeline's a little messed up. So by the time Ellie gets to California looking for them, it's been 4 months since Abby and Lev were captured by
right. You don't get a sense of exactly how much time Ellie and them are on the farm. I mean, I guess you could, based on looking at how old JJ is and looking at, okay, you've got sheep and you've got fields. And
plus the time it takes to travel to California from Wyoming by horse or by foot or whatever, Ellie says, it's probably going to take, I'd say, a week or two, maybe.
I'm also curious about all of the travels in between, because this is one of those I'm like, okay, I've driven from Jackson, Wyoming to Seattle, and that's a long way, in a car, let alone on a horse, and now you're talking, Jackson, Wyoming to Santa Barbara?
Yeah, Southern California, right?
I mean
that's
yeah.
That had to have at least taken a month, maybe.
Well, Central California. But the problem is there's nothing in between. There's Nevada. So do you go down through Utah, through Vegas? Maybe Last of Us Part 3 is Ellie's time in Vegas, coming through the infected. But, how do you make it across that desert? Or do you go back over to Portland and then down? Nobody's going through Reno. I don't know. So there were a lot of those kind of times where I was like, okay, hold up. You're talking weeks to get. And this is another place where I was frustrated with the logistics of saying, look, Ellie, I know you're pissed off. I know that you want revenge on Abby, but you're talking about 1,000 miles of traversing by foot or horse to go enact revenge and possibly die.
Yeah. Well, and imagine Dina in this and why she was like,
oh my
we're
gosh,
done.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wait 2 months to see if you're alive or not.
Just to go say hi to Santa Barbara and come back home. This is ridiculous. Anyway.
So Ellie gets to California. She fights through the Rattlers. She finds out that Abby and Lev have been prisoners of this group. And which by the way, the one cool scene was, her about to kill that one guy and being like, you tell me where they are. And he's like, I see that you just been bit. You won't make it to our base by the time that, you turn. So here's all the information you need. Good luck. You're dead. And it's funny because you're in your head, you're like, yeah, except that doesn't work for Ellie. So it was cool to see that.
It was also really neat to play through the Santa Barbara train station, especially I've been there and it looks very similar. So that was neat to play through those things. It was also super frustrating to get through that house with all the shambler, 2 or 3 shamblers and the stalkers. And, it was just when you thought you were done, here's some more fight.
No, and I would say that last part in Santa Barbara is much more combat based than stealth based, because
I felt like it was a little bit of both. I played it
Yeah.
completely stealth.
Okay.
So like by the time that I killed the last person, like nobody still knew I was there. Because that was the only way I could get through it because I kept failing. But I also thought this was one of those places where it was like, okay, well, how many other human beings am I going to take out, just to enact revenge on this one person? Like I just took out 30 people in this hotel. Also another cool place where you get to pit infected against humans.
Yep.
So you get to break the clickers free, and then the clickers go and take out the humans.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So that was a neat little place. But then let's get to the epilogue. All right.
Okay.
So we get down to the beach.
Well, you mean
we
the
get
beach.
to the beach. So we get down to the beach. You get to the first person that you see on a pole that has this big long braid ponytail, and then you realize that's not Abby. I don't know if you did the same thing I did there, but I went straight to that first person.
No.
Yeah, no, the first person right in front of you is a ponytail in a braid, and you think, there she is, and you come around and you go, no, that's not her at all. And so then finally you find Abby, but she doesn't look anything. She is a shell of the killing machine she was before.
She's emaciated,
which
she's almost bald.
Yeah, I mean, it just gave me even more like, okay, I don't want this fight. And then you cut her down and you ask her if she tells you that there are boats. And so you're like, okay, maybe because she's emaciated, maybe because she's been beaten and imprisoned and hung, she's been tortured. Maybe you have compassion, and she tells you there are boats. She and you and Lev go down to the beach. And then Ellie's like, I'm not done.
She has her moment where she's like,
this
nope.
Really bothered me.
Yeah, this is the boss fight that was hard, because now you're in control of Ellie. You're fighting Abby, who cannot fight. She cannot. It's not an even fight at all.
Right.
She's
and if I remember correctly, Ellie at this point is like bleeding a bunch.
Oh yeah.
And she's like
cut up.
Both of them are not in any shape to fight. And yet the game forces you to do it.
And it was hard.
This was the place where I'm
hard.
like, I am done pressing square. I'm completely done.
And then you get that moment where you're drowning Abby and she is about to die, literally about to die. And all of a sudden Ellie lets go.
Right.
And rolls away, and that's it. She finally had that moment that, Abby had it, way back when, that why did I do this? Why?
Well, and
why
also at this point, Abby has taken her pound of flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, she's bitten off 2 of Ellie's fingers. So Ellie's now bleeding out into the water. So it is this point where it's like, fine, okay, I give up.
Yep. So we jump now, very end, epilogue. Ellie is back at the farm. So they could have ended it there. Naughty Dog could have ended it after the fight. We go back to the farm.
Oh, that would have been awful.
And Ellie gets back to the farm, and what does she find? A completely empty farm.
Completely empty house.
No sight or trace of Dina, and all that's left in the house is the one room that Ellie used, and all of her stuff has been packed in there, all the stuff you collected, and Ellie's guitar that she was given by Joel. And Ellie decides to pick up the guitar and play the song that we've heard so many times throughout this game, and she can't play it because of the fingers that she lost in the fight with Abby. And the metaphor and moment of this, I think, is just unbelievable, that showing what revenge can do to your life and how literally Ellie has nothing left, including this one memory of Joel she had. She can't even do that.
Right. I think the message to say, that seeking revenge and holding on to this kind of grudge is going to cost you. Maybe not your life, but it will cost you all of the most meaningful parts of your life. So, I think this was just a beautiful ending to the game. You also get is this right before or right
No,
after
so
you get the flashback
after that scene, you
to
get
Joel?
the flashback. Yep, to Joel,
Right,
because
where you learn that they haven't been speaking for a long time. Where Joel does step up and is kind of a jerk, but is also kind of trying to defend her. It's also the moment where you realize the line that was haunting for me. Where it was something to the effect of, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm gonna try to learn how.
I'm gonna
Something
try
like
and
that.
do it. I'm gonna try
Right.
and do it. And this scene was actually the night before Joel dies, like in the timeline, which was what was so crushing to me. I'm sitting there watching Joel and her kind of start to reconcile from what happened, and like, let's make things better. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is the last time that she talked to Joel. Like,
Yeah.
the last thing she ever said to Joel is, I will work on trying to forgive you, which
Yeah.
goes
So
back
this is, I just want to say it because I pulled it up.
yeah,
And this is the night before Joel's death, that Joel isn't regretful about all the things that he's done, right? Which gives you the both that he would have killed everybody all over again, but that's how much he cares for Ellie.
correct.
So he says, if somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again. And Ellie says, I don't think I can ever forgive you for that, but I'd like to try. And I think that's the point where, you get that, if only you can have that same attitude towards Abby, I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that, but I'd like to try. Maybe you can have a better life.
It finally popped up, I think. And I'm wondering if that's kind of what went through her head as she's holding Abby under the water, killing her.
Right.
And realizing that, like, this has all been because forgiveness is not a present thing in this society.
Yeah. And that's the message I got from it, was
Yeah.
that idea of maybe I'd like to try to forgive Abby, was the thing that prevented her from killing Abby at the end. So then we roll credits and we get the shot of the beach and the boat that Neil Druckmann has confirmed is a shot of Avalon, and does suggest that Abby and Lev made it all the way to Catalina.
I figured they would. I mean, after that, that's what I just assumed, is they're going to make it there and that's going to be fine. Just after what happened with Ellie. So for me, it was like, okay, yeah, that has to be where it is.
Granted, that's 30 miles of rowing that boat, but
it's true. My thing
just
is to kind of conclude my thoughts on this and ideas with this is, there has been talk about a Last of Us Part 3. Naughty Dog has said they haven't decided what they're doing, but what is on the table is a Last of Us Part 3. They're either going to do Last of Us Part 3 or they're going to do a completely new IP. In your eyes, is that the end of Ellie's story? Should it be the end of Ellie's story? And do we maybe now see an Abby in Last of Us Part 3? Or is this still Ellie's, story all the way, and this is a trilogy for Ellie in her life?
I think what you need in The Last of Us Part 3 is, because the last scene you see of Ellie is her walking away from the farm.
Yeah, with nothing.
She's going someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know if she's going back to Jackson, if she's going someplace else, if she's, who knows? But I think what Last of Us Part 3 needs, Last of Us Part 2 is very much about revenge. Last of Us Part 3 needs to be completely about forgiveness. And I think that if you had a Last of Us Part 3 that centers around the idea of forgiveness, Ellie's eventually getting past the idea of revenge, and maybe trying to get back to Santa Barbara, which we now know is quite a haul from Jackson. Maybe you play through Ellie in Vegas, Ellie in the desert. I don't know. That could be fun. And maybe you get a chance to meet up with Ellie and Abby again in Catalina.
Yeah.
Where both of them work together to try to find a cure.
Well, the thing is, they never had a discussion, the two of them. Like, Ellie said, I know why you killed Joel. And it wasn't because Ellie was the cure. I don't even know, does Ellie to this day know that her dad was murdered by Joel?
Abby, you mean?
Yeah, like, does she know that that was Abby's, like, on the recording saying, like, they killed the doctor? But I don't think she ever said it was my dad. I don't know. I tried to remember back to see
Well,
if she knew.
I think you know that Joel killed all the Fireflies.
Correct.
And so I think there's an assumption, my dad got killed by the guy who killed all the Fireflies. So I think that's there. But I
I
do
would just
think,
like to see that discussion between them and have
sure,
an actual,
or
like,
even the
honest.
discussion of, maybe you're not a doctor, but maybe you picked something up that might help. So maybe Abby has some sort of medical know-how. Maybe the people in Catalina have some sort of medical know-how.
Exactly.
Maybe Ellie, as this kind of linchpin, one immune person. I think there's still more story to tell, and I would be extremely disappointed if they dropped it here and said, "That's it. We just get part 2." I deeply think that they are working on a part 3. I think that, in some of the interviews I've seen with Druckmann saying, well, we can't really talk about it, but, maybe suggest to me that it's a, yeah.
He's
I also think
working on it.
it would be
It.
stupid of them not to pull all of the power of the PS5 into making the most beautiful game we've ever seen.
Oh God.
But I think that would be a magical thing 4 years from now, that we have The Last of Us Part 3 and we tell the story of forgiveness and healing and mending all of the broken things.
So in conclusion, where do you put this? Like, is this your game of the year? Is this your game of the generation? Is this, is this a 10 out of 10, or what is your thoughts overall on the entire game after, we talked about the story and kind of the meaning behind it?
Yeah, for me, it's a 10 out of 10. It's definitely game of the year. I think from my standpoint, I really appreciate that Naughty Dog took a lot of risk in telling the story that they told, in telling it the way that they told it. It's the thing that's amazing about what can happen when somebody who is an artist has done enough commerce that the commerce people let them create art. This is like, after Christopher Nolan had proven that he could do all of the things that Christopher Nolan does, then he can go out and make Inception and Dunkirk and, whatever other movies Christopher Nolan does.
The other one be Hideo Kojima with Death Stranding. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Although that's a contentious game because a lot of people don't like delivering packages.
But it's a risk.
But yeah, I think it was a risk. I think it paid off. It told a story. It was beautiful art. I don't know how you don't give Last of Us Part 2 Game of the Year.
I think it will win Game of the Year just because of the risk, the storytelling, all that. I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now, like I said, and a lot of people are like, oh, this game's amazing. Like, this is probably my Game of the Year. And I think it's because it's just a fun, monotonous, direct, open-world game that we're used to so many. I mean, there's like hundreds of these games out right now.
Right.
And
Assassin's Creed Japan.
It's a great game. It's fun. Last of Us 2, I will say, was not fun because it made me think. It made me have to like really think about myself and really hate some of the things that I did in the game. And that feeling and that ability to make us think that as a gamer is something I don't think we've ever seen. And it may be hard to ever see that again until we get a Last of Us Part 3.
Yeah, I think it was, it does also beg the question, and this is the same question that I always ask when the Academy Awards come around, which is, should the Academy Award be the most popular movie?
Correct.
Or should it be the best movie?
Yeah.
And from my standpoint, it should be the best movie.
Yeah.
And I think Game of the Year should be the best game. Not necessarily the one that most people liked, not the most action, not the highest box office sales. I mean, you look at The Hurt Locker, which, was like less than $1 million in box office sales when it got the Academy Award. But it was an amazing film.
Correct.
And I think that that's where Last of Us Part 2 should take the cake for Game of the Year. And I would say it's definitely within the top 5 games of the decade.
Okay. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think
only because you have Red Dead and Last of Us Part 1 in the decade.
Yeah, exactly. But what a decade it was for us to get both Last of Us, some Red Dead in there. We've had an amazing, and this is kind of the end. This is the end of the PS4, the Xbox One. What a generation it was to have Last of Us Part 2, Red Dead Redemption 2, all of the exclusives we had, Death Stranding,
Yeah.
Bloodborne. It's awesome to see, and I'm really excited to see what comes next with PS5 and the new Xbox coming up. But do you have any other
and we're
last
gonna be
thoughts?
Nope. I would just say this is an amazing game. Go play it. Make sure that you're emotionally and mentally prepared and have a
Take
good
breaks.
good system of people you can talk to.
Yep.
But I would say this is an amazing game, and I would recommend that everybody play it because I think that it can make us talk about a lot of essential things. And that's what we need to be doing, is talking about essential things that are hard. That being said, if you're under the age of 35, maybe don't play it. Just kidding. Probably, you know, but I would not let my kids play this game.
Oh, no.
And yeah, that's all I got. Anything you've
Okay.
gotten wrapping it up?
Yeah. So that's going to do it for us for our very first ever spoiler cast. Who knows when we'll do this again? What game will really make us want to discuss about it and talk about it? Probably Cyberpunk if we both are able to finish that, but I have a feeling that'll never
If we ever get it.
that too. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Again, make sure you guys follow Crossfire Faith and Gaming on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Spotify or iTunes podcasts. Anything that podcast services are on, we are there. And make sure you do that so you guys get notified when these type of things go live. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up, so make sure you hang out with us and keep participating in the wonderful Crossfire community that we have. So until next time, I'm Russ Dornish.
And I'm David Petty, and we will see you around. God bless you. Bye-bye.